Hey there, Father Michael here. I've been up since 2:30, so baking bread, cleaning house, organizing the office, finishing the sermon for Sunday. When I ran out of stuff to do, I went back to bed. And then the thunderstorms began. I foretell a nap in my future sometime today. Yesterday, I got into a discussion with someone that I know sort of well about how the attitudes of today's 20-somethings are so different from back in the day, back when she was in her 20s and back when I was in my 20s. Now, keep in mind, there's 20 years between, her age and my age, but we both kind of fell into that familiar, typical rhythm. And even as I find the words spilling out of my pie hole, I'm like, oh my God, I'm becoming an old man. Back when I was young, that's how this whole conversation took a dark turn. And she struggles because she has a son who is 22. And so I could commiserate because I work with people in that same age group all the time. And as she talked, there was a clear message that she certainly seems to believe that her generation had it so much better than her kids' generation because, as she said, they still played outside. They still went on long bike rides and hikes in the parks, and they still discovered the magic and the beauty of the natural world right outside their own, back door. Well, like I said, I'm 20 years older than she is. So, of course, I could agree with that. Yeah. I'm sure that still happens. But I wonder if something, isn't maybe missing. I'm grateful for those very things, when I was coming up. But where I draw the line is at this idea, this belief that things were somehow better or simpler. I don't think they were. Yeah, the older we get, the past does seem simpler. Well, of course it does. We were kids. We didn't have deep thoughts. Life was not that complicated. Of course, things seemed simpler. We were simpler. We hadn't come into our full, intellectual capacity yet. That prefrontal cortex in the brain, that isn't even, ripe for the picking until, between ages 24 and 30. So that's why things get better at 30. If I'm honest, though, on those times like yesterday when I found myself saying old man shit about the good old days, if I'm honest, my life as a child was anything but simple. Yes, I found simple joys in simple things, but I also lived in terror. I didn't have governance over my own physical safety. I was just trying to survive and to find whatever resources I could so that I could get a little bit older, graduate high school early, and get the hell out the house so I could create my own space where I would be safe. Alcohol and weed? Hello? Yes, we had those things too. Stoners? Yes, we had those too. Teen sex in creative and unusual and sometimes scary places like cemeteries? Yep, been there, done that. Hope in the future, where we would make our mark on this world because the world was our freaking oyster and we were gonna kick some serious ass. Oh yeah, for sure. That last item, I think, is precisely where today's 20-somethings are different. And I don't know if it is related to, the onslaught of, illegal drug use, particularly fentanyl. I don't know. I haven't really got a working theory yet. I'm trying to get my head around it because there's a difference. There does not seem to be that same hope for the future that I had, that people in my generation had, that my 42-year-old friend, her generation had. Something changed in the last 20 years or so. Many of the 20-somethings that I interact with have an issue with fentanyl. And, you can call it perk 30s, you can call it Xan bars, you can call it heroin. It's all fentanyl. You aren't finding any real heroin anymore. You can't afford it. So is it that, many young people that I know have overdosed on fentanyl, some of them 10, 12 times, only to be brought back to life because somebody called 911 or a buddy had some Narcan in his backpack. For someone old and crusty like me, that's pretty scary. And I would think that if it happened once, that would be the end of my eagerness to experiment with shit. But that's not how it is with many of these young people. They're really fatalistic about it. They're like, well, everybody has to die of something. I never said those words. I still have never said those words. And I certainly have never said those words, would never even have dreamed of that sentence when I was 20. So maybe they are missing hope. Maybe that's the missing piece. But what do we do about that? Well, one thing we don't do is we stop pretending that the old days were better. That isn't helpful. I've straight up always known, since I was in high school, a teenager, what I call now shadow people. I know what some of you are thinking. We're not talking about those shadow people. Shadow people, in my original understanding, people who literally became old in their teens. I knew a couple guys in high school who literally wore their dad's wardrobe, clearly on, a trajectory to selling insurance. They were living old. People do this all the time, the shadow people. They stop. They hit the brakes on their life, and they try to keep the past alive. When I first went to Kendallville, which is a little curious town about 45 minutes away from here. I went there for a job interview in the late 1990s, and people were still wearing big bangs like Madonna in those early Like a Virgin videos, and the men, a lot of them still had the mullets. It tripped me out, and I thought, oh, what's in the water here? What's happening here? It's this very thing, right? We become shadow people whenever we like stop our fashion sense, and we're gonna wear the same hairstyle we had when we were in high school during the big game between the neighboring, the Cubs and the Tigers, and our team won. Or when we stop listening to any new kind of music because we already know that the Beatles were it and nothing else good can come in this universe. We become the shadow people whenever we decide enough is enough. We're just going to lock ourselves up back in some golden era that we have totally made up, and we stop growing, we stop experimenting, we stop really experiencing life. And it has bigger consequences when it becomes put in another context. So yeah, it's pretty messed up when an individual decides to do that, decides to idealize a past that just was not what they're pretending it was. But it is also the problem with the larger Roman Catholic Church. And I love the fact that I was raised in the Roman Church in the 1960s, in that full blush of joy and experimentation and exuberance in the wake of the Second Vatican Council. But that's not the page that the institution is on anymore. And in fact, there's been a 40-year program, systematic program of squashing all of that life and exuberance. The powers that be have frankly had enough of Vatican II. And so they've been in this retrograde obsession with a fictional past that is literally driving people away. For every one person that they bring in through their RCIA program, they lose 4 to other denominations or to no denomination. They just stop going. That is the issue, the very same issue with historical neighborhoods. I know, I lived in one. They were so happy to get this no rental covenant put in. And even though it was challenged legally, they did prevail because the idea was, we're frightened. We're frightened of minorities coming into this beige people, beige neighborhood kind of thing that we got going here. And we're so preoccupied with a fictional past that we're not even going to let you paint your house the color you want, because we know better. We want the glory days of the beige palette. Indeed. It is also, like I said, it's the issue, the core spiritual dysfunction whenever you or I decide that we are not going to look for God in the present moment, that we are going to fixate on the places we used to find God back in the day. The problem is, God doesn't have a DeLorean. God cannot meet you in the past because you don't have a DeLorean either. You only have today and right now. we become shadow people. Whenever we insist that somehow our past relationship with God, our past understanding, it's all like that was the pinnacle of our life. There is no pinnacle. The pinnacle is beyond the veil of this life. The goal is to keep moving forward. Psalm 139 reminds us, hello, people, God has already written out our days from before we were even hatched. Yes, God was there for us in the past. But that's not where we can meet him anymore. We can only meet him now, in this moment, in gratitude for having gotten us through some pretty rough times in those golden years. And in finding God in the present moment, that's where we find the confidence and the hope that God is going to be with us tomorrow and every tomorrow after that. Whenever we resist or avoid moving forward in this life, meeting God and moving forward, we miss out on who knows how many blessings God had planted there for us to find. And we didn't have a clue. So today, a rainy Tuesday, let's get out of the past. Wasn't that great? That football game wasn't that great. That sex in the open grave, that wasn't so great either. That weed wasn't so great either. What's great is right now, living our best life in this moment, free from our addictive behaviors, free from our addiction to being shadow people, trying to hold on to the past. Let's pray. Loving God, we come into your presence in this moment mindfully, with only a simple desire to ground ourselves in you, the ground of all being. Be with us today. Whenever we are tempted to think that the past was somehow superior or better than today, help us to reach out to those who are struggling today, those who have lost hope. Help us to share a word with them, a word from the story of our journey with you. Help us, most of all, to simply trust and to be okay in this present moment, knowing that you have us in the palm of your hand and we ain't going no place. Amen. Have a great day.